Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis 11b of Maseches Kiddushin. We are 8 lines from the bottom of the page. The first word on the line is Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So we're discussing the opinion of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai hold that a man cannot betroth a woman with just a pruta, a copper pruta. He needs to use at least a dinar, a silver dinar. And the Gemara suggested so far a couple of reasons, the rationale behind Beis Shammai's opinion, and now we have another one. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Taimayu de Beis Shammai ki de Chizkiah. The reasoning behind Beis Shammai is in accordance with the statement of Chizkiah de Amar Chizkiah. Chizkiah said, Amar Kra vehefta. The pasuk says in the context of a Amma Ivriya, of a Jewish maidservant, it says vehefta, it says, and he will redeem her, or allow her to be redeemed. Melamed, to teach you, shemegaras mipidiona viyotza. It teaches you that he diminishes the cost of her redemption, and she goes out. In other words, the verse is talking about a Amma Ivriya who is going to be redeemed. She's a Jewish maidservant, so usually if it says in the pasuk, we'll talk about it shortly, but that he's to marry her, to be miya'ed her, to marry her, he or his son, and the pasuk says that the pasuk says imra'a b'nei adoneha, if she's bagging his eyes, if he doesn't want to marry her, asher lo Ye'ada, Asher lo Ye'ada. He doesn't. If he doesn't marry her, if he doesn't designate her as a wife, vehefta, and she'll be redeemed. So then it talks about redeeming her. Now the pasuk is telling us that vehefta. I could have said v'niftis, and she becomes redeemed, but it said a language of vehefta, which sounds like the man, the owner, is involved in her redemption. It teaches us that he has to assume some of the cost of her redemption, which is that the cost to redeem her is at is diminished by the number of years that it's prorated by the number of years that she's been with him. So let's say he purchased her he acquired her for let's say she was 8 years old when he acquired her, and she goes out when she's 12 and a half. So if he acquired her for, let's say, 40 shekel, and now she's 10 and she's being redeemed. So then, since it was, let's say, 4 years at 40 shekel, so the cost to redeem her is only 20 shekel. That we diminish based on, we prorate it based on how long she's been there. And that's him taking on some of the cost, so to speak, in her redemption, that the cost to redeem her goes down. So what do we learn? So what does that have to do with us? What does that have to do with Beis Shammai and Kiddushin? That's talking about a Amma Ivriya, a Jewish maidservant. So explains the Gemara, I amart bishlama diyahavla dinar. So if the case was that he originally acquired her for a dinar, so hainu dimegara ve'azla ad pruta. So then there's room to talk about the diminishing per year prorated value, that she will later be redeemed for less than what she was originally acquired for. Ela I amar diyahavla pruta. But if you tell me that she was only acquired for one pruta, mi pruta mi megara, is there any way to diminish a pruta? Pruta is the smallest currency. You can't have a penny, you can't have half a penny, right? There's no way to break it down to half a penny. So the same thing with the pruta. Pruta is the smallest form of currency. So if the pasuk talks about the idea that she might be that she's going to be redeemed for less than her cost, it means her cost must have been, the original cost to acquire this maidservant must have been at least more than a pruta. We're assuming a dinar, at least a dinar. And we want to learn from Amma Ivriya to a marriage, that just like by Amma Ivriya, we see that you need to acquire her for at least we're going to say for now a dinar, more than a pruta. So too, says Reish Lakish, that's where Beis Shammai gets the idea that also for a marriage it has to be more than a pruta, it can't be just a dinar. Asks the Gemara, V'dilma hachi kamar achmana. Maybe this is what the Torah is saying, Heicha dinar tigra ad pruta. If you originally acquired her for a dinar, then you could diminish by, prorated value down to even a pruta. But Heicha dinar pruta. But if he only acquired her for one pruta, lo tigra kol, he shouldn't, there's nothing to diminish, there's nothing to devalue, and there this idea wouldn't apply. In other words, the Gemara is asking, how can you prove from the fact that the Torah discusses a scenario where you prorate the value, that has to always be the case? Maybe the Torah talked about a case where you prorate the value in a situation where he purchased her for more than a pruta. But does that mean that he couldn't have purchased her for a pruta? Maybe he could have, and in those situations there's nothing to diminish. So fine, that's not what the Torah was talking about. It was talking about specifically a case where he bought her for more than a pruta. Then there's what to talk about prorating it, diminishing her value to redeem her. But maybe he could have acquired her for just a pruta, and if so, we would no longer have a proof to learn from there to Kiddushin, that Kiddushin can only be for more than a pruta, because really Amma Ivriya could be for just a pruta. Says the Gemara, top of the next page, Lo salka daitach, don't think that. Why? How do we know that it can't be a case where it's just a pruta? Dumya de yiyud, because it's similar to yiyud. Yiyud is where the man actually marries her, the maidservant, or his son. Then ma yiyud afal gav di bayi miyayid, vi bayi lo miyayid. Even though the Torah really gives the option. When a man acquires an Amma Ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, he has the option to marry her or not. If he doesn't, then, like we're saying, she goes free. Either there could be a situation where she redeems herself, or she just goes out when she becomes an adult. But he has the option to do to marry her or not. And yet, even though that's an option, yet, the halacha is, it's going to be learned in a Gemara later, on Daf Yud Ches, 18b, that the halacha is that a father, who's the one who sells his daughter as a maidservant, he may not sell her to someone who cannot marry her. Someone who halachically is forbidden to marry her, he can't sell her. So he can't sell her to a relative who's forbidden to marry her. So that's the halacha, that's learned out. That's when it comes to you, to the marriage. So says the Gemara, just like there, if it's not shaykh, if it's not relevant, it's not possible for the buyer to marry her, then the father cannot sell her. So hachanami, so here too, with regards to the diminishing value, if it's not, there's no potential for the diminishing of her value because she was purchased for the minimal amount in the currency, just a pruta, so there also we would say, lo havus vinas vini, the sale is not a sale. So says the Gemara, and it's learning it from the fact that these two words are put right next to each other in the verse. It says, asher lo ye'ada vehefta. He didn't redeem her, and he didn't marry her, vehefta, until he'll cause her to be redeemed. So they're juxtaposed right next to each other, just like when it comes to ye'ada, to marrying her, we learn out that you can only sell her in the first place if it's possible for the man who's acquiring her to marry her. So too, the word that's right next to it, vehefta, which talks about redemption, but we learn from there the idea that the owner, the Baal, has to take on some of the cost of her redemption. In other words, that we diminish, we prorate the sale. So therefore there too, that we learn that it's only a sale in the first place if it's even relevant, the possibility that would she be redeemed, then there would be a diminishment in the cost to redeem her. And therefore, she cannot be sold for just one pruta, because it wouldn't be possible to diminish that amount because there's no lower amount. So that's how we know that she can only be purchased for more than a pruta. And now it goes on to finish explaining it. So therefore, the Kiddushin isha leBeit Shammai nafka lo me'ama ha'ivriya. And Beit Shammai is learning Kiddushin from Ama ha'ivriya, that from the Jewish maidservant. Dema Ama ha'ivriya bepruta lo mekanya. Just like an Ama ha'ivriya cannot be acquired for one pruta, af isha bepruta lo mekadsha. So too, a woman cannot be mikudeshes, cannot be betrothed for just one pruta. That's where he gets it from. And therefore she has to be betrothed for a dinar. Asks the Gemara, ve'ema palga de dinar. Fine, we understand she can't be betrothed for the minimal amount, which is one pruta. But what about two prutas? Or here it says, what about half a dinar? Ve'ema shtei prutas. Or what about two prutas? Who says we jump all the way to a dinar? Maybe it's half a dinar. Maybe it's just two prutas. An Alma Ivriya could be purchased for that, seemingly, because why not? You could diminish two prutas to one pruta, right? So seemingly that would work. So why does Beit Shammai say that the minimal amount is a dinar for Kiddushin? It should be two prutas if you're learning from Alma Ivriya, from the Jewish maidservant. So explains the Gemara, Kevan da fikte mi pruta ukma adinar. No. Once the Torah teaches me that one pruta is not enough, so what it's really saying is that you need a chashav amount. You need something that's significant. And therefore, I don't know exactly how he arrives at this, but Beit Shammai arrives at the conclusion that once the Torah says it can't be a pruta, it has to be a dinar. It has to be at least a dinar. And therefore, it seems by Alma Ivriya, Beit Shammai, or Reish Lakish at least, is suggesting, based on Chizkiah, that the minimal amount to buy an Alma Ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, would be a dinar, because once it's not a pruta, it has to be something significant, so it's a dinar. And we learn from there, too, Kiddushin, that Kiddushin also has to be for at least a dinar. That is his approach in explaining Beit Shammai. The Gemara continues, says, Rava says a different reason for Beit Shammai. Hainu taima de Beit Shammai. This is the reason for Beit Shammai why you need a dinar for Kiddushin. Shelo yehu benos Yisrael kehefker. So that the Jewish girls are not treated like hefker, like ownerless, like meaningless. It's disrespectful to the girl to allow her to be betrothed for just a pruta. That's the reason for Beit Shammai. Rashi learns that this is midrabanan, that the Rabbanan said that it's disrespectful to them, and so the Rabbanan required, the Chachamim, the sages required at least a dinar. Now we had a similar idea back, the first reason I was giving, but I think it's the flip side. The first reason back on 11a, which was given, was Reb Zera. He said, Isha makpedes al atzma. He said a woman is makped, she's concerned, she cares about herself, she will not accept for less than a dinar, because it's beneath her honor. That was coming from her perspective. And there, the Gemara actually came out that if she would accept for less, then it would work. Over here, it seems not that way. Over here, we're defending the woman's honor. The Chachamim are saying, we will not allow a girl to be betrothed for less than a dinar. Again, according to Beit Shammai, it's beneath her honor, it's disrespectful to her, and therefore the Chachamim said, you cannot do it. It has to be at least a dinar. Now, that's all in the opinion of Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel disagrees, and we actually paskin, we rule like Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds that Kiddushin works even for the minimal amount, which is a pruta. So now the Gemara is going to examine Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, we're on the first wide line in the middle. Beis Hillel omrim bepruta. The Mishnah said that Beis Hillel says that a woman could be betrothed for a pruta. Savar of Yosef lemeimar pruta koldehu. Rav Yosef thought to say that when the Mishnah says a pruta, it means even a very valueless, low-value pruta. In other words, in whatever time or place you live in, if your pruta is less than the pruta of the Torah, the pruta discussed in the Mishnah, if it's less than that, that's okay. Says Rabbi Yosef, even then you could use the pruta for Kiddushin. The way the Rashi says it is, however that generation changes the value of the coin, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, and it doesn't matter. It could be that just based on the amount of copper in the coin, the copper weight of the coin. He says it doesn't matter, even a very low value pruta, even that could be used for Kiddushin. That was what Rav Yosef said. Amar le Abaye said to him, V'ha'ala katani, what do you mean? The Mishnah said about this, Kama hi pruta, how much is a pruta? Echad mishmona be'isar ha'Italki. It said it's 1/8 of the Italian isar. So the Mishnah is stipulating the value for a reason. Beis Hillel says you can use a pruta for Kiddushin. Says the Mishnah, how much is the pruta that you can use for Kiddushin? It's 1/8 of an Italian isar. So Rav Yosef, what are you talking about? You're saying it's whatever, the pruta is in your society? No, the Mishnah specifically tells us how much that pruta has to be worth. And if you'll tell me that was just in the generation of Moshe, the Mishnah was telling you how much the pruta of the Torah was worth. But now, it's whatever people value it at, it doesn't matter, and even if it's worth less than that, you can use it. Says Abaye, that's not so. When Rav Dimi came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, Amar, he reported the following. He said, Shia Rabbi Simai bedoro kama yipruta echad mishmona be'isar italki. Rabbi Simai would evaluate, or he did, this happened, Rashi says, it was a maisa. It happened, a woman came to him and she had been betrothed for a pruta, and he checked, he was Meshire, he measured how much it was worth, whether it was worth 1/8 of an Italian isar. And Rashi says it wasn't, and he was mevatel, he nullified the Kiddushin, he said it doesn't work. So says Rav Dimi, says Abaye, I think this is Abaye talking, but he's still asking on Rav Yosef. He's saying, you can't just use any pruta. We have a report from Rav Dimi that Rabbi Simai actually measured a pruta to make sure that it was of the value of the 1/8 of the Italian isar, and it wasn't, so he nullified the Kiddushin. V'chiyasa Ravin, Amar Rabbi Dostai. And we have a similar scenario where Ravin said the name of, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he reported that Rabbi Dostai, Rabbi Yanev, Rabbi Oshia, Shiaru Kama have a pruta. They also measured the pruta to make sure it was enough. V'chashuv echad mishisha b'isar italki. And they wanted to ensure that it was at least 1/6 of the Italian isar, not 1/8. I guess 1/6 is more. They required even a more valuable, perhaps, we'll see, but they required it to be 1/6 of an Italian isar. We'll have to talk about what the difference is, why one did 1/8, one did 1/6, but either way, both of them are requiring a specific amount for the value of this pruta, and they're not just saying whatever the pruta's worth, it's fine, any pruta goes. No, they're specifically making sure that it's enough. So it seems not like you're saying, Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, you're saying that any pruta goes to be Makadesh a woman. But that's not the case. They were checking how much those prutas were actually worth, how much those copper coins were worth. So, Amarle Rav Yosef said back, Ihachi, if that's the case, Hainu de Tanina, so how do we understand the following brisa? It says, the brisa is talking about a person who was nene, who benefited from hektish, person benefited from something that was sanctified to the Beis HaMikdash, and he needs to bring a carbon, and the carbon is worth 2 silver shekel. The carbon costs 2 silver shekel, and even if the person was only benefited from 1 pruta worth of hektish, of something sanctified for the Beis HaMikdash, still, the cost of the carbon is at least 2 silver shekel. 2 silver sellas. Shekel and sella, I think, are the same. So, says the Brisa, what we see the severity of benefiting from hektish, and this was even b'shogeg, even though the person unintentionally did it, they have to bring this carbon, and it costs them 2 sella, even for only benefiting from 1 pruta. We see how severe this avera, this transgression is. And says the Brisa, it says, Tzei v'chashuv kama prutos b'shnei slaim. Think about it. It says, go calculate how many prutas are in 2 sellas. Yoser me'alpayim. Says the Brisa, there's more than 2,000 prutas, copper prutas, in 2 sellas. So you see, so that you see how severe this transgression was. That's what the Brisa is saying. Says Rav Yosef, what is this Brisa talking about? Hashta alpayim lohavyan. If, according to our calculation, which we'll go through in a moment, but he says, according to the way you're valuing these prutas, at 1/8 of an Italian isar, that's not going to be 2,000 sella, 2,000 prutas in a sella. It's going to be less. That's a higher value to the pruta. And it's going to be less prutas, less than 2,000 prutas will make up 2 sella. So if it's not even 2,000, hashta alpayim lavyan, yeser me alpayim karilu, he's going to go and call it more than 2,000, right? The expression was, the Brisa said, go and calculate how much these prutas are worth for benefiting from 1 pruta, he has to bring two sellas, carbon that costs 2 sella, that's more than 2,000 times the value. It says Rav Yosef, according to our calculations, it's going to be less than 2,000, and he's saying it's more than 2,000? How does this make sense? So rather, says Rav Yosef, I must be right. The Brisa must be talking about a different pruta, that we don't have to always go by the pruta of the times of Moshe, that it was worth 1/8 of an Italian isar. Obviously, this pruta is a less valuable pruta, and that's how it could come out, that the Brisa is saying, for benefiting from 1 pruta, you'll have to pay 2,000 times that, because it must be talking about a pruta that's less valuable. And so similarly, he wants to argue that we should say the same by Kiddushin, that you could use a pruta that is less valuable than 1/8 of the Italian isar. So Amar Luhu, so actually I did the calculations here on this piece of paper. I got lots of calculations coming up. So just to go through it, Rashi speaks it out, but I wrote it down because it's a little bit easier. So the calculation is as follows. We're talking about a carbon that costs 2 sella. Now each sella is worth 4 dinar. Each dinar is worth 24 isar. So 4 dinar would be 4 times 24. Each dinar is 24 isar. 4 dinar is 4 times 24. That is 96 isar. So 4 dinars is 96 isars. So 1 sella is 96 isars. Now we're going to be talking about 2 sellas, but just 1 sella is 96 isars. Now each isar is 8 prutas, we're saying, right? Because we're saying that a pruta is 1/8 of an isar. So that means there's 8 prutas in a isar. So that would be 96 times 8, which is going to be a nice number. 780, whatever it is. We'll go through it again the way I wrote it out here. So 2 sella. We're really talking about 2 sella. So 2 sella times 4 dinar, because each sella is 4 dinar. So 2 sella times 4 dinar is 8 dinar. So 2 sella is worth 8 dinar. 8 dinar, each dinar is really 24 isar. So 8 dinar is really 192 isars. So we have 192 isars, and each isar is 8 prutas. So 192 times 8 is 1,536 prutas. That's the number the Gemara is about to give. So that's not 2,000. So if you're using the value, if you're valuing the prutas at 1 at 8 prutas to an isar, then it's only going to be 1,536 prutas to equal 2 selas. So says Rabbi Yosef, clearly we're using a lower valued pruta. Says the Gemara, Amar Lahu Ahu Saba. A certain older man said to them, he explained, Ana taninala, I taught this brisa as follows, not that it's more than 2,000. They didn't say, go calculate it, 1 pruta is more than 2,000 sela. Rather read it, that it's karav l'alpaim, that it's close to 2,000. It's karav l'alpaim, it's close to 2,000 sela, and 2,000 prutas, and that's how you should read it. Ask the Gemara, Sof, Alpha, V'chamesh Meo Tlasin V'shisahu. It's not close, it's 1,536. So how do you call that close? So even according to that. So the Gemara said, V'shisahu dahavi, and that's how much it is. Says the Gemara, Kivan denafka l'humi palga. Once you pass half, 1,500, so Karov, Karile. At that point, we call it close to 2,000. In other words, the Gemara says, you know why the Brisa says that it's close to 2,000? Because it's closer to 2,000 than 1,000. Because it's 1,536 prutas. So once it's that much, it calls it close to 2,000. That's how you should read the Brisa. The Brisa is talking about the pruta of the Torah, the pruta that's 1/8 of an isar, 8 prutas to an isar. That's what it's talking about. And Rabbi Yosef has no proof from here that we could be dealing with a pruta that's less valuable than or more less valuable than 1/8 of a isar. The Gemara now will examine these statements and compare them, because we had a statement that they examined the pruta and it was 1/8 of an isar, and the other ones examined a pruta to make sure it was 1/6 of an isar. So what are these two numbers, 1/8, 1/6? Says the Gemara, Gufa, let's look at it itself. Ki asar Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, he said, Shir Rav Simai Bedoro, Kama hi pruta, Echad Mishmona Bisar Italki. That Rabbi Simai evaluated in his generation how much a pruta was worth, whether it was worth 1/8 of an Italian isar. A woman was betrothed for a pruta. He wanted to make sure that it was at least that amount, 1/8 of an isar. V'chi asa Ravin Amar, and when Ravin came, he said, Shir Reb Dostai, Reb Yana, Reb Oshia. Reb Dostai, Reb Yana, and Reb Oshia, they evaluated an isar in their time to see, they evaluated pruta to see, kama hi pruta, to see how much it was worth, echad mishisha b'isar italki, to make sure that it was at least 1/6 of an Italian isar. So Amar le Abaye Rav Dimi, Abaye said to Rav Dimi was the first one that I mentioned. When Rav Dimi came, he reported that Reb Simai measured out the pruta to make sure it was 1/8 of an isar. Says Abaye to Rav Dimi, Neima at the Ravin beplukta dahani tanai kam mifligisu. I want to suggest perhaps that you and Ravin are having the same argument as the following Tanaim, the following people from the times of the Mishnah. These were Amoraim, Abaye, Rav Dimi, Ravin. And Abaye says to Rav Dimi, you who are saying that they had to evaluate it to make sure it's 1/8 of an isar, and Ravin who is saying they had to evaluate it to make sure it's 1/6 of an isar, you seem to be having the same machlokas as the following Tanaim. The Tanya, as the Brisa says, Pruta she'amru chachamim echad mishmona b'isar italki. The pruta that the chachamim spoke about is 1/8 of the Italian isar, like we're saying, right? 1/8, like our Mishnah says. What's the calculation? So, sheish ma'a kesef dinar. There are 6 silver ma'as in a dinar. 6 silver ma'as in a dinar. And by the way, a dinar, we already said, is 24 isar. So we'll have to keep that number in mind, that there's 6 ma'as, silver ma'as in a dinar, in 1 dinar, and the dinar also is worth 24 isars, because isars are going to be what we're working with. Now, each of those 6 ma'as is shnei pundionin. Each ma'a is 2 pundions. These are all different types of coins. Pundion shnei isarin. A pundion is 2 sorry, one second. A pundion is 2 isars. I think I skipped something. 1 second. Okay, a pundion is. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. Let's put what I said aside for a second. Let's just read it as it says it. 6 ma kasef equals 1 dinar. A ma'a is 2 pundions. Pundionin shnei isarin. A pundion is 2 isars. Isar, each isar is shnei musmisim, is 2 musmises. Misme shnei kontrunkin. A musmus is 2 kontrauks, another type of coin. Kunternak shtei prutos, and a kunternak is 2 prutos. Nimsa pruta achas mishmona be'isar itaki. It's going to come out that a pruta is 1/8 of a Italian isar. Because again, we're saying here that there's 2 prutas in a kunterik, and there are 2 kunteriks in a mismas, so that's 4 prutas in a mismas, and there are 2 mismases in an isar, so that's 8 prutas in an isar. So that's our number right there. We have it that there's 8 prutas in a isar. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says something else. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Shlosha Hadrasin Lema'a. A different calculation. He said that there are 3 hadrasin, another type of coin, in a ma'a. Shnei hensin lahadris. There are 2 henitzes in a hadris. Shnei shmaning lahenitz. And there are 2 shmanin coins in a henitz. Beis prutos l'shmanin. And there are 2 prutas in a shaman. Nimsa pruta achas mishisha bisaritaki. According to him, it comes out that there's 1 pruta. A pruta is 1/6 of an Italian isar. How does he arrive at 1/6? So let's work it backwards. So he's saying that there's 2 prutas in a shaman. And there's 2 shamans in a hanat, so that's 4 prutas in a hanat. There are 2 hanitzes in a ma'a, so that's 8 prutas in a ma'a. And there are 3 hadrasins in a ma'a. So let's do that one more time. Let's do this one more time. We're working with the line backwards. So there's 2 prutas in a shaman. There's 2 shamans in a hanitz. So that's 4 prutas in a hanitz. There are 2 hanitzes in a hadris. So that's 8 prutas in a hadris. And there are 3 hadrasins in a ma'a. So that's 8 times 3 prutas in a ma'a. That's 24 prutas in a ma'a. If there are 24 prutas in a ma'a, and what the other number we have to know is how many ma'as are in a dinar. There are 6 ma'as in a dinar. So if there are 24 prutas in a ma, and there are 6 ma'as in a dinar, so that's 6 times 24. 6 times 24 is 6 times 20 is 120, plus 6 times 4 is 24. That's 144. So there are 144 prutas in a dinar. And each dinar is 24 isar. That was the number I gave you before. There are 24 isars in a dinar. So 144 prutas equals 24 isars. 144 divided by 24 is going to be 6. So that's how you get if 144 prutas are equal to 24 isars. So each isar is worth 6 prutas. That means a pruta is 1/6 of an isar. That's the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So says the Gemara, Lema demar amar kataya kama v'Ravin damar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So it seems that Rav Dimi, who said that pruta is 1/8 of an isar, that was like the first opinion, who said 1/8. And Ravin, who said that it's 1/6, was like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that it's 1/6 of an isar. Amar le. So Rav Dimi said back, no. Bein didi ubein Ravin aliba detaya kama. No, both me and Ravin can both be going with the opinion of the Tanakama, who held that the pruta is 1/8 of an isar. So how come I said it's 1/6? So below kasha, it's not a problem. Ha de ikur isuri, ha de zol isuri. One is where the isar was worth more, and one is where the isar was worth less. Ha de ikur isuri. When the isar was worth more, it was 24 isars to a dinar. 24 isars to a dinar, or to a zuzah, to a zuz, which I think is the same as a dinar. Ha dizol, when the isar was worth less. Kum tlasenu train bezuzah. So then the zuz then it took 32. Since the isar is worth less, it takes more isars. It took 32 isars to make a zuz. So when the isar was worth more, 24 isars made up a zuz or a dinar. And when the isar was worth less, so then it took 32 to make up a dinar. And what he's saying is that the value of the pruta versus the dinar doesn't change. That's set. The value of the isar is what changes here. And so the number of how much the pruta is worth versus a dinar doesn't change. How much a pruta is worth versus an isar, that's what changed in these two times. When the dinar was worth more, when the isar was worth more, when 24 isars were worth a dinar, so then the pruta was less valuable versus the isar because the isar was worth more. So then the pruta was only 1/8 of a isar. But when the value of the isar changed, when the value of the isar was less, and it took more isars to make a dinar. It took 32 isars to make a dinar. So then the value of the pruta was more, and then it took only 6 prutas to make an isar, and the pruta was valued at 1/6 of an isar. Says Ravin, that's what we were talking about. We were both in agreement that of how to measure a pruta versus a dinar. But when we were comparing it to the value of an isar, we compared different values because the value of the isar was what was fluctuating. Okay, we'll stop there and wish you a good week.